Okay, so let's go ahead and just dive in. And again, if we have additional guests coming in, then they can hop right on as far as where we are with information. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know that there's different levels of us kind of responding to the COVID-19 situation. Some struggling, some thriving, but I'm really excited to offer this webinar for you. Housekeeping, obviously, keep your mics turned off. And then go ahead and write your questions within the chat bar. You guys, there's access to the chat bar along the bottom. There's a little button. Or raise your hand in the screen, or do a virtual hand raise. That way we can track your question. Ashley, who's online, she's our communications and program manager, she's going to help track the questions for all of us. And we also received some questions when you registered, so we'll make sure to try and touch on those as well. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Raziah Roushan, Executive Director for Tualatin Valley Creek. Some of us have met in person or had other email strings. Ashley Baker is our Communications and Programming Manager. And Beth Toby is our guest speaker today, and she is the manager for the Beaverton Arts Program. Just another highlight that Tualatin Valley Creates is doing short webinars addressing these timely COVID-19 topics. It's related to the arts, culture, heritage, and humanities. That's our focus mission. That you can, I really also want to drive the point that there are a lot of resources coming online extremely quickly. So make sure that you're doing the research for what's available to you. Make sure that you're signing up for these new e-newsletters, following organizations and individuals on social media, and then also connecting with people in your community that are kind of the wave makers or the people in the community that have their thumb on the pulse, that that they can also connect to your resources. I highly recommend calling them and doing virtual coffee or some other way that you really reinforce that relationship with them. And to encourage everybody that you're going to make it through this, have some confidence, ask the right questions. So really that we're all in this together. And then finally, you guys all heard about this webinar probably through TVC. We are keeping up-to-date information going in regards to funding opportunities on our Resources for Creatives page. We also share those through our social media. And then we also have an interior page for COVID-19 specific resources as well. And so those are everything from employment concerns to housing things and more just general topic as well. So to open up, and also we'd like to, so go ahead and unmute your microphones for a quick minute. So what we'd like to do is do a quick round the room of simply, are you an artist joining us as an artist, as an individual, or are you representing an organization? And then that way we can make sure that we're helping to answer and kind of curate the conversation to what you're here for. So go ahead, click around the room. How many are individual artists who are joining us about just individual concerns? All right. And how many of our guests today represent an organization? Maybe a staff member, a volunteer, a board member? Okay. Good. All right. So Beth, did you get to see all that?
I did not actually. For some reason, the screen went blank. So tell me, what was the result?
Okay, so it looks like we had about 2 individuals as artists, and I would say 80% of our guests as representatives from organizations.
Okay, great.
So I would like to, since we're going to keep these nice and short and really intense learning experiences, I'm going to hand the microphone off to Beth Toby. Again, she's the manager with the Beaverton Arts Program, so that she can go over some of the bullet points and big picture thinking in regards to proposals and looking at these urgent COVID-19 funding opportunities. So Beth, it's on you.
All right, thanks, Raziah. So hello, everyone. My name is Beth Toby, and I am the arts manager with the City of Beaverton. I've been in this role for about 5 months, so I'm sure I will get to know many of you over the coming years and probably have you apply for grants and projects in Beaverton. we have released a grant for arts organizations for relief funds. So if you represent a 501c3 or you have a fiscal agent that's a 501c3, we do have a grant program currently open for relief around COVID. And we have funding in both this fiscal year's budget and next fiscal year's budget. Right now, we're conceiving of it as a one-time grant, but if we're finding that we need to reopen it later, we may be able to do that. But right now, the grant that we have is open through May 8th. So the deadline is May 8th. And it's, like I said, really focused around relief funds for arts organizations. And really, if you're in a really dire situation, like you can't make payroll, you're going to lose your event space or your office space, things like that. So I was talking to Raziah earlier, and it's funny because there's a lot of general tips we can give you around grants and how to apply for grants. And then ironically, this COVID situation is slightly different than some of those tips as well, because we're asking you to be dire, so to speak, in what you're telling us. Whereas normally in a grant application, you would not want to come across like you're begging or you're in a really dire situation. But I'll just go through some really high level tips, and then I'm happy to answer questions specifically about our program or get into some of the questions that were emailed earlier. Actually, how many of you have applied or received a grant for your organization? Can I just raise your hand physically on the screen? Okay, all right, great. So then we have a lot of people that have not applied for a grant in the past. So that's okay, that's good to know. So some really high level tips, of course, are make sure you read the guidelines. Make sure that you're following the instructions. If you're not sure, if you have a question, make sure you reach out to the grant manager and ask. You know, we don't mind answering questions. We don't want you to pester us to death, but build a relationship with your grantors. They want to know who you are. They want to understand who you are. If there is any sort of a workshop or a training offered or a webinar offered about applying for the grant, attend that. You will learn a lot of information, and you'll also learn a lot from other people that ask questions. You know, that's one of the reasons I like going to trainings, is because I can hear what other people are asking. Make sure that your answers are clear and concise. You don't have to be really long-winded or flowery, be really to the point. A lot of times people that serve on a grant panel are reviewing 20, 30, 40 applications. And so that's a lot, as you can imagine, a lot to read. And so panelists really appreciate it when you're concise and you're really clear. So say what you need to say with the fewest words possible. That being said, do explain exactly who you are and what you do and what you're asking for. So make it really rudimentary in the sense that don't assume that the panelists know who you are or understand what you do. Raziah referred to it as the peanut butter and jelly instructions earlier today when we were talking, which I thought was a great metaphor. I don't know if any of you were in second or third grade, had to write out instructions on how to make a peanut butter sandwich, but it's kind of like that. Make it really, really, really obvious. I have some other so have a friend or someone else read your application in advance and give you feedback, especially someone that might not be familiar with your organization. You might want to assemble your grant application in a separate document so that if the website crashes, you don't lose everything. And then I think my other tip is volunteer on a grant panel if you can. If there's organizations that are looking for volunteers on a grant panel, you will get a behind the scenes look at what it's like to be reading 30 or 40 applications, and sort of like the discussions that panels have when they're reviewing grants. That will really help you figure out how to do your own grants and write them clearly. And And again, like I said, build a relationship with your grantor. Ask those questions. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to say on a high level. I'll leave it there, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the program we have in Beaverton. So again, it is for 501c3s or someone that has a fiscal agent that's a 501c3. And it really is around addressing, are you really in a very dire situation? You know, maybe, for example, your primary fundraising event was going to happen in March, April, or May, or even in June, and you're not going to be able to do that now. So how much do you normally raise at that event? Tell us about that, show us some documentation, and say, you know, oh, I should say also that our grants are between $2,000 and $7,000. So $7,000 is the max right now. If we're finding out that this is a continuing issue, we may be able to increase that in our next fiscal year budget, which will be July 1. But also, please be patient because we're also figuring this out as we go. You know, I created this COVID grant, and I'm also very open to feedback. So if you go in and you fill out the information and you think this isn't really like, this is a weird question, or why are you asking that, or you should be asking this instead, let me know. I'm open to that feedback as well. So the Beaverton grant is open to organizations that serve the city of Beaverton or are located. Obviously, if you're located, you need to be serving the city of Beaverton. So if you're serving the residents of Beaverton with your arts organization, then that's when our grants are open to you. So I think that's all I have for now, and I'm very open to questions, or Raziah or Ashley, if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, let's invite our attendees to the webinar. If you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand on the screen. If you're joining by phone, maybe unmute yourself and do a quick, I have a question.
I should add, so the city of Beaverton has put together a web page that has a lot of resources on it for artists and arts organizations. If you go to beavertonoregon.gov /arts, ARTS, or even just Google Beaverton Arts Program, you'll find it, it'll go right to it. You can find those resources and the link to apply for our grant. And then if you're not familiar with the Americans for the Arts, they have a huge section on their website of resources, both for arts organizations and for individual artists, including links to grant programs. So Google Americans for the Arts COVID, and you will find that page, and it's just a vast, vast resource. If you're an individual artist looking for grants, there's also an organization called artistrelief.org, and that's also listed on the Americans for the website page, but you can also apply for grants as an individual through artistrelief.org.
Yeah, let me bring Ashley in too, because Tualatin Valley Creates, you know, we help keep track of as many grant and funding opportunities that are coming live all over the place. Ashley, are there any others on your radar that are specific to individuals?
On our website, on the COVID-19 resources page that Raziah shared in the chat, there's a few relief funds that are available for specific types of artists, like performing arts, musicians, and I've seen some dance ones as well. So if you Google any of those things that are specific to the kind of art you do, you may find something. And also take a look on our website, and there's other organizations that have put together very comprehensive lists as well. OPB has one too that's been shared a lot.
Yeah, and I think to speak as well, so many of our local artists here in Northwest Oregon are probably all familiar with the Regional Arts and Culture Council.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a great umbrella, very local. They also are posting a lot of immediate funding resources and other resources as far as professional development skills to get through what we're going through. And so they have been a very strong advocate of compiling more money into these emergency funds. and some of them are as small as $500, but it's still relatively easy to get until the money runs out. So think about those for yourself as well.
And I'd also like to add that in addition to resources specifically for artists, there's a lot of small business resources out there as well. So if you're part of an art gallery or nonprofit organization, there's lots and lots of resources for small businesses, and those are also on our website, or you can search for them. But definitely take a look if you're part of a small business organization.
So around the room, are there any questions from our guests? Raise your hand. Donna?
Excuse me. Yes, I'm representing the Village Gallery of Arts. Could you clarify dire? An organization, let's just say the organization can make its monthly payments, but hasn't a penny for anything else that would help it survive.
Yeah.
What would that be a reason to apply?
Yeah. I would say yes, apply and explain that. So I'll just read you a few of the criteria that we have. So yes, every organization is experiencing financial impacts, but we want to really hear that the situation is acute for you. So things like not able to make payroll, potential for losing your current performing arts space or your rental space, not able to make certain payments that you need to make, like loan payments. Is there an emergency, like an imminent loss? Oh, I already said that. I mean, those are really kind of the main things. But, with any grant program, you're evaluated within the context of all of the other applications, right? So if we get 10 applications and we have the funding to fund all 10, we may go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So and it's not the application that we have isn't super duper long or super tedious, I don't think. So I would say go ahead and apply. I always say apply. I mean, yes, you don't want to spend all your time applying for things you might not be eligible for. But at the same time, I have seen this happen so many times where an artist or an arts organization applies for a project or submits a grant, and the panelists say, well, I don't know if they're right for this opportunity, but now we know who they are, and they're perfect for this other opportunity that might come up down the road. So, and like I said, if you want to call me and we can talk through it as well and see what your specific situation is, then I might have a better idea of where you would land in the spectrum of grant ability, if that's a word.
Well, I feel that we are semi-dire. We're not going to go out of business in a month, but we can't take advantage of a lot of things that we should. Getting online, being present in the community. We're worried about that. And I think that's dire.
Yes, and actually that is one of the questions in our grant application, is if you have any expenses related to having to take your programming online or in a new, if now you need to spend $1,000 on videotaping your program or buying a zoom.com, subscription or whatever, that is one of the things that we have in our application. So if you need to spend $1,000 to take your programming in a different direction now because everything is online, that is a criteria that we have. So you could apply for funding specifically for that part of what you need to do.
Okay, so be specific about what you need it for.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I think Natalie had a question as well.
I have a question and somewhat of a comment. I'm a traveling head wrap concierge, so most of my service is face to face.
Mm.
My main stream of income has been vending in the past and most recently. The issue that I face right now with applying for grants where I live, I'm a renter and it's managed by HOA. And so in the city of, I believe when I went to talk with the city, they need permission from either homeowners or the HOA. My HOA does not allow home-based business, although I'm not specifically working from home. It's because I store product inside the house. And so I'm eliminated off that. And it doesn't allow me to, I can't receive a business license from the, although I'm registered with the state. And so a lot of my, again, main income is vending. Most of my vending would happen between Hillsborough, but mostly in Portland. I'm not a resident of Portland. So you have to either be a resident of the city or have a business license for the city. So I'm kind of executed in, on both sides. I've had a huge loss of income because of, what is it called? When you register for these events. So the last event I registered for was the Portland Women's Expo. That took me over $500 just to register, on top of buying products and so on and so on. So I've had a huge loss just in that one event. And I usually do pretty well when I attend these events. I sell pretty well. And then there were other events because I traveled. So I go outside of Oregon. I go into Washington because I'm a Washington State licensed cosmetologist, and I serve women who are suffering with hair loss or other personal needs. I do a lot of personalized shopping for them. So what would you say to someone who is kind of boxed in but X'd out at the same time when they're looking for resources and they've had a huge loss of income? And I feel like I'm just in a budget crisis right now because I can't apply for most funds or grants that are out there right now for the COVID-19, but I have been affected by the COVID-19 with my ways of, making income.
Yeah, that sounds like a tough situation. Our grants are for organizations, so they're not for individuals. However, the artistrelief.org, those are for individuals, and I think you would definitely qualify. Now, I'm not sure if, there's, like I said, I think they're being inundated with, grant requests, so I don't know how much they could potentially give you if they do. Are the vendors refunding the vending fees?
With the Portland Women's Expo, they postponed it. So they have 2 dates, one in the fall, one going into next year. So there's no refund there yet. Okay. They're waiting to see what happens. And then I had 2 other events that were in Washington, and they have not refunded because they are as well trying to wait to see what has happened. So I'm just feeling like I'm in a budget crisis because that money is gone and I have to wait to see what's going to happen and if folks are going to come back out to these events to even want to, purchase.
Yeah. I mean, the only other advice I could give is there an organization you can partner with to do a project? So is there a 501c3 perhaps that serves a clientele that you could do a project with, that could be your fiscal agent and you could get a grant that way? Whether that's teaching a class on how to make the head wraps or how to design things, or even tips for, I don't know what that would be, but that would be my other suggestion is there a 501c3 that you could potentially partner with in order to get a grant? Raziah, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I think just to continue with what you suggested, especially partnering with organizations, looking at that fiscal agent opportunity, Natalie, looking at researching individual artist support, individual COVID artist support. There are other support mechanisms that are still live that don't technically have anything to do specific with COVID-19. So looking and researching for those. I think that hopefully you'll also find funding opportunities that are not geographically specific because you travel. So some other resources you might consider are state level funding opportunities. So obviously the Oregon Arts Commission, the Oregon Cultural Trust. I don't know if you'd be eligible for the Oregon Community Foundation, but they have definitely put some funds together for the people in need right now. Beth also talked about the Americans for the Arts. As an individual, you are very unlikely to be eligible for like an NEA grant. Usually you have to be working on some pretty substantial efforts. But always good to know the National Endowment for the Arts also has an e-news and a social media platform, so I highly recommend staying connected in that manner. And then looking at, so as a fabric artist and some of our other visual performing and literary artists as well, who are different people that you've worked with in the past that might have access to resources that can help float you through right now as well? So one of the neat things that's happening with one of our theater organizations here in our city, in Beaverton, is that they've actually opened up to their actors and their stage designers and said, we have enough funds to help you do this, even though we can't do the programming. So we'll have you do other things that aren't related to trying to sell tickets and get people to the show. So these are other avenues that you might consider. If there's been any other individual artists, any other organizations that you've worked with, to make sure that you call them and ask them too, because they know who you are.
I would also add there are some really specific grants and funding resources that I'm happy to send you that are specific to like craft artists and women artists. And I can send you links to those COVID emergency relief funds.
So we had a number of questions submitted when you registered. So Ashley, do you want to pick a couple of those out if anybody hasn't raised their hands, anything that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, one of the questions that was in there was how to estimate certain kinds of losses, like how to estimate losses around not being able to do a show, or as Beth mentioned, like not being able to do a fundraiser. So maybe Beth or Raziah, you can speak to that question of how to estimate budget deficits, losses.
Definitely. So one thing is knowing if you've been able to track your history for how much you otherwise would earn on something that was a program or a project that you had to cancel. That's one of the quickest ways. The other is to realistically think about what kind of ticket sales you might have had or what kind of sales you might have had. So to speak to the example of being a vendor at different events, so the loss of not getting your refund from your registration, or that postponement of not getting that money back, which then means that you don't have the money to jump in to an opportunity that opens up. So there's a dollar amount. The dollar amount of maybe your ticket sales for production, your painting sales, your photography sales, any books or poetry books that you've just released. Okay, so those you could have predicted having a particular outlet could have earned you $1,500. So there's a dollar amount. Then looking at seeing if you can offset that in any regard if you do online sales. So you can kind of pull that one out of what those costs would be. But basically you want to do a line item, line by line. You're going to add those up as well. Rent. So another good thing to also want to point out is if you are an organization and you rent a brick and mortar some of the landlords are doing discounted rent, but you want that as a line item on your budget. So our rent is $1,200 a month. Our landlord is giving us a $600 discount, but you have it as a line item. You can actually see it and track it. So those are the things that you want to really call out if a proposal that you're submitting is looking for what are your expenses and how are you already doing your homework. So those, I think, are ways to broadly think about these. Is obviously using your history to track your sales, and then kind of knowing what your portal was going to be that was canceled, and then your prediction for what those sales might have been. Those are numbers. Those are quantifiable numbers.
Yeah, and I would just add that since a lot of organizations are now trying to do things online, so they may still get some sales from online, but it's probably going to be less than what you've done in the past. So explain that. Say, we're moving to an online platform and we're expecting sales to be around half of what they've been in the past, so 50%. Something to that effect. Obviously, none of us know the future, so none of us can perfectly predict what your loss of income might have been. But I think it's really around showing kind of a track record. So this is, the last 2 or 3 years, this is what we've made on our annual fundraiser, or the last few years, this is how many ticket sales we've had. So sort of that, showing the pattern. I guess I would just say that as an addition.
Yeah, I agree. That's perfect. The pattern. Ashley, do you have a couple other questions that might have popped up?
Yeah, I was going to give everyone an opportunity to see if there were any questions about everything that we just covered as well. Well, one of the other questions that we had through the submission form was, what are the resources for somebody who's a new artist and not well experienced in the industry? And maybe Beth, you could speak to this. What advice do you have for somebody who's not applied for a grant, is maybe a little bit nervous about it, and isn't sure they're going to qualify?
Well, I would reiterate that read the eligibility and make sure you understand the grant really well, but contact the grant organizer. We are usually very willing to talk to you and help you figure out how to have a successful grant application. We can't write it for you, but we can definitely coach you. And of course, we also can help with the City of Beaverton with translation or other special needs that people might have. Sometimes if someone has a special need, we're able to accommodate that. So maybe we'll sit down with you and walk you through the application. So yeah, I mean, don't be shy. Be confident. Be confident in what you do. And we can help you get through that process.
And one more question would be for organizations that don't generate profit from what they do. Say they offer plays for free or gallery exhibitions. How would somebody write about that on their grant application, especially when so many future funds are going to be diverted to emergency grants?
Yeah.
So how to sustain ongoing operations for nonprofit activities?
So it's an organization that offers free programming. But the people that are running the programming are probably getting paid something, right? So you could think about, we wouldn't be able to do these workshops if we weren't able to pay the people that are there. So quantify that. And you can also, I think you could make an argument that the value of what you're offering or what you would normally charge for this event is XYZ. So we would normally, a normal workshop for an artist would be $100 registration fee for each artist. So you could quantify it that way as well. Say this would normally, if we weren't offering it for free, cost $1,000 to put on. I think that be realistic. Don't overinflate what you're saying your value is. But that I think that's definitely an argument if you're offering something for free, that it would cost this much to the community if we didn't offer it for free. I hope that made sense.
We're getting close to 12:15. So does anybody have any other questions that we can address before the end of the webinar?
Donna, it looks like your hand went up.
Yes. Beth, how would I get in touch with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So my office phone number is 503-526-2299. But the best way to reach me is just to email me because we're working remotely. So my email is B for Beth, and then Toby, which is my last name, TOBEY, at beavertonoregon.gov. And we also have a generic email inbox that goes to me and my other two staffers. You can also email that, and that is artsmail, so ARTS mail, MAIL, at beavertonoregon.gov. But like I said too, if you Google Beaverton Arts Program, you'll find our page, and our contact info is on there as well. And a link to the COVID resources as well as the COVID grant that we have right now.
Okay. Yes, that was my next question. Thank you. Okay.
Well, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up while everybody's brain is still soaking it all in and before there's no more room in our minds. I want to thank everybody who joined us. I think that we have a guest that's joining us from as far as San Diego. And to just kind of remind you that a lot of the skill sets and information we shared today is not only specific to Oregon, but also just kind of the broader understanding of how you can go about connecting with these resources and connecting with the grant managers and the funding managers, and then being successful in your proposals. Just to remind you that Tualatin Valley Creates, on our website, we have a resources page, resources for creatives, that's got links to funding opportunities right away. I shared that link in our chat if you guys have been able to see that. And then we also have a COVID-19 resources page. Again, that's got not only the relief funding opportunities, but also kind of the broader picture of business resources. If you have staff, if you're dealing with contractors, rent. I know we've talked about rent a little bit, if you have a brick and mortar. And then also in the chat, again, is Beth's the Beaverton Arts Program link. As Beth was saying, you can find it just by Googling Beaverton Arts. Very easy. And I encourage you to go sit in on an Arts Commission meeting if you get a chance in the future sometime. And so you can reach us at Tualatin Valley Creates at either 503-567-1713 or emailing our direct inbox, which is simply info@tvcreates, so TV like television, creates with an S.org. And we can help answer questions as we go along as well. And then I also want to point back to, as I was emailing for this webinar, I shared a document that also has some of the other upcoming webinars that TVC is going to offer. They're also short, 30 to 45 minutes, very timely, specific to what we're going through right now. They are being offered for free because we want to make sure that you have the tools and resources that you need and the information you need to succeed. And so on the bottom of that sheet, you can see some of those that are coming up. You can also find those on our website under our workshops page. All right, Ashley, did I miss anything? And I think we'll...
As I put in the chat, there's our email address, so you can always reach us, and also consider following us on social media. We're always posting grant deadlines and our opportunities, and those go in our newsletters as well, so consider signing up for those.
So I want to give a big thanks to Beth Toby, who was leading our conversation today, and thank everybody who joined us today. And we look forward to seeing you at one of the next webinars or somewhere when we're allowed to all get together.